Doctor Who might have just tipped their hand towards the true identity of Mrs. Flood, with one theory arguing she's the new version of a classic Doctor Who character who debuted 46 years ago. Debuting in the 15th Doctor's first full solo adventure, Mrs. Flood's apparent identity as a kindly old neighbor to Ruby Rose was subverted when she not only recognizes the TARDIS, but commented on it directly to the viewer. Since then, theories about Mrs. Flood have driven serious discussion in the Doctor Who fandom. Mrs. Flood reappears in the ending of Doctor Who Season 14, The Empire of Death, hinting at her full knowledge and true importance in the show. This has only spurred on further speculation about what kind of character Mrs. Flood could be. Many theories argue she's a new version of a classic character. However, one of the most compelling suggests that Mrs. Flood isn't a returned Ronnie or Romana, but rather a new take on a far more powerful force. Mrs. Flood's outfit hints she's Doctor Who's White Guardian. Mrs. Flood's white coat could be a clue to her true identity. Anita Dobson as Mrs. Flood wearing a white coat in Doctor Who. Mrs. Flood's distinct outfit in Empire of Death could be a clue to her true nature as the modern take on the White Guardian. Mrs. Flood appears at the very end of Empire of Death, seemingly breaking the fourth wall much as she did in her first appearance in The Church on Ruby Road. Notably, Flood clearly speaks to the audience directly. She assures the viewer that Ruby's story has a happy ending, but warns that the fate awaiting the Doctor is full of terror. It's quietly unsettling, especially when by her earlier referenced unseen plans. All of this suggests Mrs. Flood is operating on a grander scale than the rest of the universe. Coupled with the visual of her in a puffy white coat, this could hint that Mrs. Flood is secretly the modern Doctor Who's take on the White Guardian. Introduced during the Fourth Doctor's era, the White Guardian is the anthropomorphic personification of order. Balanced out by the Black Guardian and their inherent connection to chaos, they are two important cosmic forces in classic Doctor Who. It would explain why Mrs. Flood appears so knowledgeable and hints at her potential future role. Being the White Guardian would explain Mrs. Flood's presence. Mrs. Flood's sudden appearances could be explained by cosmic power. Doctor Who White Guardian. Mrs. Flood's timely appearances would fit perfectly for a god of order. While the White Guardian was somewhat good, it was always hinted that the entity wasn't entirely noble either. This could help explain the slightly nefarious tone of Mrs. Flood's appearances so far in Doctor Who, and could turn her mention of plans into a more ominous tease for future events. The cosmic powers of the White Guardian would explain Flood's awareness of the Doctor, and the white coat would serve a similar visual purpose to the white suit worn by the White Guardian. A similar white coat was also in the wardrobe of Romana, a Time Lord companion of the Doctor in the classic Doctor Who. This isn't the only former companion outfit that Mrs. Flood has replicated, though. She also wears outfits that resemble Rory, Clara, and Ryan's costumes during their stints with the Doctor, further reinforcing an awareness of Doctor Who's universe that even Time Lords didn't recognize. Being a godlike entity like the White Guardian would be able to more easily explain Mrs. Flood's apparent knowledge, and directly connect the cosmic force with other important deities like the Toymaker and Sukha.